Hey everyone, thank you to the members of the committee for hearing this issue today. My name is Shayda Soleimani. I'm an artist, an associate professor at Brandeis University, but most pertinent to the reason that we're here today, I'm a federally and state licensed wildlife rehabilitator, and I'm the executive director of Congress of the Birds, which is the only wildlife rehabilitation clinic in the state that specifically focuses on the care, rehab, and release of wild birds in our state. So it's gonna be a little intense, my testimony, so bear with me. But this is a really critical issue, and it comes with a lot of intense feelings and a lot of intense kind of case studies. So I'm gonna assume that most people in this room have not really seen an owl, an eagle, a hawk, or a falcon up close. Maybe you've seen them, maybe you're driving on the highway, you see them kind of sitting on the light poles as you're driving by, maybe on 95. Maybe you're a birder, maybe you use that Merlin app and you hear their sounds, or you go bird watching and you see them in the trees and you get really excited because they're such incredible birds. But by up close, I mean in your hands. To really understand and appreciate the devastating effects of rodenticide, there's nothing more heart-wrenching than holding a dying bird of prey in your hands. It's awful. As a rehabber, I've learned what to look for when I get birds of prey in my clinic. Is its mouth pale? Are they covered in bruises? Are they bleeding profusely and their blood won't clot? Are they showing neurological signs? I'll never forget the first time that I had a patient and admitted a patient with suspected rodenticide poisoning. It was an eastern screech owl, and it had been found on a sidewalk near an apartment by a family who was walking their dog. When they arrived to my clinic, their teenage daughter was holding the owl, who was wrapped in a towel that was covered with the owl's blood. You can't really be squeamish in this kind of line of work. So there's a lot of blood, unfortunately. It was bleeding from its mouth, and it didn't appear to be stopping. As she handed it to me, she asked with her eyes wide, "Is it gonna be okay?" And I had to answer truthfully to her, "I don't know. It's unlikely, but I will do everything that I can, and I always do everything that I can, but this is a real battle that we are up against with SGARs." It's crazy to think of a body so tiny to be losing so much blood. Eastern screech owls, for reference, are around 180 grams. That's about the size of an avocado, for those of you who might not know weight-wise. Not only was the owl bleeding from its mouth without clotting, its little tiny body was covered in bruises and it was seizing. Each one of its eyes was rapidly dilating and contracting out of sync. The owl looked terrified. In these situations, I actually can't help wondering, too, if they're gonna be okay, just like the teenage girl. I wonder if they are gonna be okay or not. Do they know that they're dying? How do they feel about the needles being pushed into their little bodies and the tubes being shoved down their throats as I try everything that I can to help them? Meanwhile, their frail and fragile little bodies deteriorate in my hands. I tried everything in my toolkit. Vitamin K to help reduce the anti-coagulant effects. Toxaban, which is a charcoal and kaolin suspension to absorb the poison in the stomach. Fluids to help replenish all of the lost blood. Anti-inflammatories to help with its pain, because it must have been in so much pain. But I put in the oxygen machine. We have an oxygen condenser, and hoped for the best, but I knew what to expect. About 6 hours later, the owl died, face down in the oxygen chamber, its eyes open wide, its pupils dilated at different sizes. I will never forget its face. I won't ever forget the faces of any of the patients that I've had come in for suspected SGAR poisoning. Neither will my students. In 2020, during COVID, I had to teach remotely. And while teaching remotely on Zoom, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I told my students to sit tight while I just grabbed the door. My doorbell's always ringing, and I'm always getting animals arriving at my clinic. So my computer was in earshot of the door, and unfortunately, my students heard everything. It was Gina, who some of you might know, was one of the Providence animal control officers. She said, "Sorry I didn't call. I was on a drive to pick up another animal, and I saw this hawk, and I had to bring it to you. It needs help, and I didn't want to wait too long." She ushered towards a carrier with a gorgeous adult red-tailed hawk in it. "I need the carrier back. Is it okay if you could grab it out of there?" she asked. I obliged, and I looked at the bird. It was shaking, and the inside of its mouth was pale. "What's wrong with it?" Gina asked. "Likely rodenticide," I said. "I'm gonna have to take it downstairs. I'll end shortly." So as I walked over to my laptop to tell my students that we'd have to end class early, the hawk began rapidly declining in my arms. Its head started to hang as it panted with an open mouth, and its body shuddered as it took its last breath. It died in my arms, and my students witnessed it. In shock at how quickly everything happened, I laid the body of the hawk on my floor and described to my students what had happened. I told them that the hawk was exhibiting symptoms associated with SGAR poisoning. People ask me all the time if I get used to death, if I get used to things dying or having to euthanize things. And the answer is no. It will always be no. As long as I've had to see animals suffer and die because of human negligence and selfishness, I will never become accustomed to their unnecessary deaths. Is it going to take more birds dying in my arms for our legislators to take notice? I believe that this is a Rhode Island issue. This is our issue. And I urge the council to support House Bill 7783 to ban second-generation anti-coagulant rodenticides in the state of Rhode Island. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Representative Boylan.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you very much. I have a comment and a question. My comment is I'm wondering if we should, if the sponsor would consider making this bill effective upon passage, because I'm not sure if we can wait. That's just a comment.